Welcome back to the 3D character for animation tutorial. I'm your exciting host, MapBot, recording for Skyward Warrior so she doesn't have to deal with poor sound recording quality. In part 1 of the tutorial, we reviewed creating a model sheet, learning to navigate the 3D workspace, and a collection of various modeling techniques needed to create your character models. This video will go over the rest of the basic steps you'll need to take in order to have a character that is ready to be animated. Here, Skyward is detaching DJ's eyes from his head model because she decided she wants to add what are called morph targets to them so that they can be warped to create expressions. This will be relevant much later. Step 9. Unwrap to texture. Once all parts of your model are completed, it is time to move on to texturing your model. However, you must first unwrap all parts of the model to ready it for texturing. Unwrapping means drawing seams along the mesh of the model so it can be unfurled into a flat map of parts. This can be saved as an image to draw over top of to paint on the textures. Much like symmetry or turbo smooth, unwrapping can be applied as a modifier in 3ds Max, called UV unwrap. Skyward makes her textures in Photoshop, but once your base map is rendered, you can make it in any 2D art program, just like with the model sheet. When unwrapping, be sure to draw complete seams, otherwise the model will not flatten out properly. Also, make sure your seams are in places that make them less obvious, like on the back or underside, or along a natural seam in the mesh. The more organized your flattened parts are, the easier it will be to draw the texture. If you cannot find places to hide the seams, draw them in places where you can at least easily understand how your model is divided up. And any shape that resembles a tube should have one long seam and two caps. 10. Creating texture maps and texturing the models. Once you've unwrapped all parts of the model, it is time to take your rendered texture maps into another program and create the textures. Skyward takes her texture map bases into Photoshop, where she can draw directly on top of them. Texture maps rendered from 3ds Max have green outermost borders and white lines to indicate mesh topology inside. Make sure that you understand the orientation of the unwrapped parts, and fill them in completely to prevent any holes or other unwanted errors. For DJ Music Man, Skyward starts with base colors she gathered from references and her model sheet. Once they are put down, she moves on to adding the weathering effects to his texture through different types of brushes such as pastel and watercolor style brushes. Once the textures are satisfactory, save them as JPEGs and bring them into the 3D program like how Skyward brought in her model sheet in Part 1. Apply them as bitmaps onto standard materials and apply the materials to the corresponding model parts. These textures are basic color textures. The materials that they are applied to have reflections, or specular settings, as well as a bunch of other values like roughness and bump or normal maps. Those values can be edited usually either through sliders on the material itself, or you can create textures for them like the base color one. For this model, Skyward simply balances the specular by increasing the roughness. If a texture is applied to a model, and then you feel that it needs editing, you can go right back into your 2D program and edit it. Then save it to the same JPEG. When you return to the 3D workspace, the texture should have updated automatically. If edits to the texture itself aren't fixing issues, it is possible to edit the unwrap itself on the model in question. Later on, Skyward makes adjustments to the unwraps in the 3D program, because there are certain parts of a texture map that can get stretched along the seams when a turbosmooth is applied on top of the unwrap. Turbosmooth always has to be the modifier at the top, since the extra polygons would become difficult to work with when drawing seams for the original unwrap. Pushing and pulling certain parts of the unwrap will change how the texture looks on the model, so try to experiment if you need to. Step 11. Creating the character rig. Once all of the models and textures look good, the next step is to create a rig so that all parts can be linked together and ready to be animated. A rig is made up of bones that correspond to all major parts of your character, and should be reshaped, resized and reoriented to match the character before any actual models are attached for motion. Most 3D programs have you construct rigs from scratch by dragging out each bone, and then creating them off of each other, assigning their natural order, such as shoulder to upper arm to forearm, forearm to palm, etc. However, 3ds Max has a comprehensive built-in program called CAT, or Character Animation Technology, that lets artists use pre-made rigs and customize or create their own while the program can understand what types of bones you want to use. Skyward uses cat rigs for her characters. DJ Music Man is spider-like. 3ds Max has a spider rig available to use, however it would not fit him because his arms are not double-jointed, and he only has 6 limbs. Due to this, Skyward builds his rig from scratch. First, she drags out a base rig platform, which just tells the program where the origin of the rig is. Next, she creates a pelvis bone. Pelvises act as the foundation for the character rig, and move the whole rig when moved. You can also select a whole rig by double-clicking it. From there, she creates neck and head bones with generic, unnamed bones. After this, she creates one arm. Selecting to create an arm automatically creates one, and it can be reposed, sized, etc. to match the character's limb and base T or relaxed a pose. When telling the program to create another arm, it automatically creates a mirror image one to the first, which saves a lot of time. Once this is done, the rest of his arms are only a matter of copying an existing one by its collarbone, and getting it into place. the rig is fully set up, it is time to assign the models to the rig. This process is called skinning. Step 12: Skinning a character to its rig. Now, onto the character skinning. To do this, each model needs to have a skinned modifier added onto it. This modifier lets you add bones from the rig that you want to affect each model, and it will automatically try to properly assign the model to the rig. If parts of the mesh are warped when trying to move the bones, you must edit the envelopes, and paint weights. This means you must go into each vert and assign a specific amount of strength that the bone has on it. For instance, a hand model will have bones per finger. A vert on the thumb must be strongly affected by thumb bones, and unaffected by pinky bones. Alternately, you can go into each bone's envelopes, which indicate their area of influence and are represented by vector loops, and scale them. Skyward sticks to just painting weights. More often than not, changing the strength of one bone in one area on a model may affect values on other areas, so it's best practice to go through each bone in the affected model and make sure that they function correctly. This must be done for every model, especially ones with more than one bone. Skyward takes a detour to create morph targets for DJ Music Man's eyes and eyebrows. First, add morpher modifiers to each object that will need to be able to change shape. Next, make copies of the objects that will need targets. These copies will be the targets, and you make changes to their geometry to whatever new shape you want your object to morph to. The targets cannot have turbosmooth when being applied back to the root object. The morph modifier has a list of empty slots in which you can pick and order your targets into. Each slot has a percentage slider to use when turning the targets on or off when animating. Once you've finished skinning your models, the character is ready to animate. Congratulations. If you noticed, Skyward did not technically finish DJ Music Man, since she did not make his animated, emissive mouth texture. She decided that for the purpose of simplifying this tutorial, she would go do that on her own afterwards, along with any other touch-ups needed to finish him. In fact, she might also at some point revise the daycare attendant as well, especially regarding his textures. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. Thanks for watching. This is MapBot, signing out once again.